Hey guys, what's up? It's Finch here. Today we are going to be discussing black and white overused. Yes, my favorite generation, and a generation many of you are fond of as well. Generation 5, black and white. We are back with a video on overused, in particular discussing the viability rankings of the tier. For those of you unfamiliar with that terms, basically the Pokemon at the top are the best, Pokemon at the bottom are the least, but everything on this list is considered usable in black and white to some degree. So Pokemon like, let's say, Ferroseed, Ferrothorn's not fully evolved form, aren't going to be on this list. But Pokemon that are fully evolved and usable in the OU metagame, as you see here, are on this list. And then there's a couple exceptions like Chansey and Kadabra, actually, which is going to be things that we'll discuss throughout this video. But for the most part, we're going to be focusing on the S, A, and some of the B ranks as well. Let's define each rank before we move forward, as this is something that's been kind of a long-standing debate among the competitive Pokemon community, and also I just want to define my terms before I proceed. Much like any other debate of best of all time or best in a certain context, it does need to be discussed. I personally come from a background of sports, so I hear people discussing who's the GOAT basketball player or baseball player, this, that, and other things, sports that I really enjoy. And of course, before going into that argument, you could frame the argument in a certain way to make multiple cases. Well, I'm going to frame it in my own way, given my vast experience in the metagame over 10 years now, and hopefully I can give the best case, the best argument for the current metagame, because this is the current metagame that's not like a historic list, if you will. So this is completely reflective of the 2021 October. That is when this video is happening. I'm sure people will watch this in the future, hopefully not in the past. That'd be weird. You got some time traveling guru shit going on. But yeah, so S rank is Pokemon that are not only metagame defining, as most of the Pokemon A+ are as well, but Pokemon that are staples, that define archetypes, that construct team building, that really have been mandated in certain contexts, no matter what, for a long period of time. You could argue Politoed fits into that definition, but I also want to say that the weight of which archetypes are used and the weight of their consistency is also factored here. So seeing as Sand is the status quo in the metagame and has been for a number of years, although it's falling off a little more and more recently. You could have argued that Trento had been 1 or 2, for example, 3 years back. Leaves me ranking it well above Politoed, despite them both serving purposes of weather, because the other things Tyranitar can do are far and beyond that of Politoed. Moving forward, A ranks are Pokemon, particularly in A+, that define the metagame, play a significant role in the metagame, and have substantial usage or niche, but they do have significant drawbacks, or their upside is not enough for them to qualify for the S tier, and don't have that necessarily like, oh my goodness, I can't go 3 minutes of discussing black-white without this Pokemon coming to mind tier, if you will. As we move forward down to the A-, B+ ranks, these are Pokemon that are clearly good in the metagame, that will see semi-consistent usage, but might not necessarily break the bank. If you never use this Pokemon, you haven't tried it out, you can still find success in the tier, so long as you at least pay some attention to it in team building. These are Pokemon that you don't want to necessarily neglect, but at the same time, they shouldn't be your first and foremost focus either. Getting further down the list, B and B- rank are fringe Pokemon. Fringe Pokemon that fit on certain archetypes definitely have a place in the metagame. If you ask an experienced player what they do, they'll know 100% what they do. They've said, oh, I've seen this. They could recount a memory or two where this Pokemon has popped up and played a significant role, and then maybe have even been higher in historical context, but have fallen off for one reason or another. But that is more or less why they're here. And finally, in the lower B- ranks, in the C ranks, these are Pokemon that are borderline. You've seen them here once or twice, or maybe they've trended at one point in time, but ultimately they're very fringe. It's going to be hard to sell me or anyone that's a really experienced black-white player in these Pokemon, but there is a scenario where you can justify their viability within the context of the metagame. I also want to note that this is a list that was provided by some of my black and white OU forum moderators. I moderate alongside them. I believe Peng and FNH helped make this list, maybe Gary the Gengar as well. They're all amazing people, great contributors. I do want to note there are a couple Pokemon that I also would add to C rank on top of these. Things like Azelf, for example, I think is fringe viable enough. Espeon, you could argue as well. And I don't believe either of those Pokemon quite made this list, so yeah. Pardon me, there are just a couple of things. Oh, sorry about that. A couple of things. We could argue for Infernape as well that would probably fit in the C rank. And there are things that you might see less than 1% of the time, but if we're going to list things like Chandelure or Blissey or Kadabra, then they would kind of fit in the same group as well. But I'm going off the Pokemon that they gave me, and this is for the purpose of voting for the Viability rankings for their thread. So that thread is going to be up in the near future. I'll try and link that as well, because I know a lot of you guys are Black-White enthusiasts. I also encourage you guys, if you're interested in Black-White, to join the Black-White Discord. We're popping. Follow Black-White tournaments. SMogon Classic playoffs are starting in just a number of days, so that's very exciting. In addition to that, right around the corner is SBL, where I will personally be playing Black and White OU for hopefully the entire tournament. I'm very excited about that. Last couple years, I went 6-3, a really strong record, and I'm hoping to follow it up with an even stronger showing this time. So you have to stay tuned, and if you're lucky, I might get some coverage on that as well on the channel. Anyway, we are already 5 minutes into the video, so I'm going to stop rambling, and we're going to go ahead and start the list. I first want to preface that by saying that the tiers are all in order. So in S rank, for example, Latios is my number 1 Pokemon, Ferrothorn's my number 2 Pokemon, and Tyranitar is my number 3 Pokemon. You can carry this on by saying things like Politoed is my number 5 Pokemon, or things like Alakazam is my number 7 Pokemon. That is true. If I were to rank the Pokemon in order of viability, that would hold true, and it goes down the list as such. For example, things like Kadabra are my absolute last Pokemon. That's like, I guess it's viable, sure. Things like Pure and Black are above the tide in B+, but still behind things at the bottom of A- like Tornadus Incarnate. Make sense? Okay, let's get popping. Latios being number 1 should not be a surprise to you guys. You know how fondly I am of Latios if you guys have seen me cover the tier time and time again. In fact, just to make a point, but also not to hold myself back, in SPL 10 back in 2020, I used Latios on 10 out of 10 teams. That is right. 10 out of 10. Actually, no, sorry, 9 out of... that was 9 out of... was it 10 out of 10? Yeah, it was 10 out of 10. My apologies. Yeah, I went 6-4 that year, not 6-3. I misspoke prior. But yeah, I used it all 10 weeks. I used a number of sets. I used Dragon Gem, I used Specs, I used Scarf. And I had no regrets about it. In the meantime, in the elapsed time, between Sleeping Band, making it less tied to things like Sleep Talk Roulette, between the prevalence of the Colberberry set, and plenty of other partners to it, it's gotten even better. Believe it or not. In fact, there was a time where I believe Ferrothorn was ranked above it, and I think you could just by Ferrothorn being number 1. So let's discuss the grand old who is the true top dog in Black-White debate. Because there have really been 3 Pokemon in my eyes that qualify. A lot of people actually been putting Tyranitar first or second in their submissions, supposedly. I haven't taken a look at them. I don't run the Viability rankings thread, but a lot of people's logic is Tyranitar is the sand setter. You don't have sand teams truly without Tyranitar. Hippowdon sand is used a small fraction of the time for every single time you see Tyranitar, and that's why you see it all the way down in the middle of B rank, whereas Tyranitar is sitting squarely in S rank. Well, the thing is, Tyranitar is indeed a staple on sand teams, but I would argue for as much as Tyranitar is a staple on sand teams, Latios and Ferrothorn are staples in the metagame as a whole. Unless you're using hyper offense, there's a more likely than not chance Ferrothorn's going to be in your team. I say that without any exaggeration whatsoever. There's a greater than 50% chance Ferrothorn is going to be on your sand teams. There's a much greater than 50% chance Ferrothorn's going to be on your rain teams. There is a greater than 50% chance for using Weatherless Balance, or roughly 50% chance that Ferrothorn will be in your teams. And on top of that, you can even argue it on some other archetypes as well if you really want to go that far. Sun, maybe not. Weatherless Hyper Offense, maybe not. But that aside, pretty much everything else out there, you can see Ferrothorn on it. Latios, you're going to see Latios on a lot of sand teams. Maybe not all of them. Again, maybe a little closer to half. You're going to see it on a myriad of rain teams, about as much as you'll see anything else that's short of Politoed, Tentacruel, and Ferrothorn. You're going to see it on pretty much every Dragmag team, a lot of weatherless offensive teams. You're going to see it on Psy Spam a ton, be that be sand or weatherless. You're going to see it on weatherless balance teams a ton. Even some teams you might see it on occasion as well. Moreover, I want to say that Tyranitar is metagame defining in the sense that it sets the tone. It's primarily a reactionary Pokemon, though. Why is Sand so good in Black-White? Well, in part because of the chip damage that Sand gets and the special defense boost for rock types like Tyranitar itself, sure, but a larger portion of that is to dissuade opposing weather setters and the fact that the primary Sand user has such a viable defensive positioning in this metagame. First and foremost, Sand dissuading other weathers. If you have Sand against a rain team or a sun team, you're undoubtedly going to be able to dissuade them from setting their weather at least once, if not twice or thrice, potentially even more times, to the point where your Sand may be up more often than their weather, and that is going to dictate how their team functions. They might have Pokemon that are specifically meant to function under those conditions, or function better under those conditions. For example, a Kelios Hydro Pump is going to do so much less in Sand than it would in rain. Or, for instance, Fire-type attackers, or back in the whole chlorophyll metagame, which thankfully does not exist anymore, a lot of Pokemon would do better under Sun on Sun teams than not. Things like Cresselia, its Moonlight is so much less effective in Sand than it would be under Sun, for example, and that completely wrecks it. If Sun was permanent and there was no Sand in Black-White, Cresselia would be one of the best Pokemon, but that's simply not the case, so yeah. On top of that, though, not only does Tyranitar display weathers, but particularly with the Chople Berry, but also just in general, be it with the Scarf set or with the Utility set or anything in between, as Tyranitar can virtually run just about anything in this tier. Pursuit in a tier full of Psychic types for a Dark type is valuable beyond my words. Pursuing a Latios, minimizing the effectiveness of a Rio Nicholas or an Alakazam. You can go down the list, being able to 1v1 things like Celebi and Starmie, potentially even dissuading the hazard removal or hazard stopping from Xatu on a Sun team. You know, catching a choice locked, whatever it may be with Pursuit, is huge. Again, you think of things like Latias, you think of things like the aforementioned Cresselia, even Slowking if you go further down the list, etc. There is reason why those Pokemon are so good in the metagame, and that's because Psychic is such a strong typing, and Magikarp in particular is an amazing ability, making things like Alakazam and Rio Nicholas Pokemon that haven't really been OU staples since then are top tier in this tier, particularly Alakazam. But in the case of Tyranitar, it is one of the primary lines of defense against it defensively. It can switch into anything that's not Focus Blast and then eat a Focus Blast afterwards, or force it to two of them. Chople Berry is amazing. And because of that, it potentially just outright hard walls non-Focus Blast Rio Nicholas, which is growing more and more common over time. On top of that, it also is able to dissuade things like Tornadus and Thunderous T, big, scary rain threats that help minimize the effectiveness of a very potent playstyle in rain offense. Rain offense is undoubtedly very good in the metagame, but Tyranitar's place can kind of keep it at least playable against it, and that's huge, because Black-White isn't a tier where conventional norms apply to balance, check, and counter, give, and take. No, in a sense it is broken shakes broken, and there are going to be pushes that are so strong that you have to have very specific countermeasures in order to take that push and push back. And that is how we play Black-White. That's why the tier is so proactive. That's why the tier has games that don't go turn 100, turn 250. Those type of stalwarts are seldom seen, if ever, beyond, you know, two Gliscor Sands duking it out against each other when they've got enough spike immunes. Moving past that, though, Tyranitar obviously sounds great, and I just gave a humongous reasoning as to why it's one of the best Pokemon, and to why, despite it not being a premier offensive presence, despite it not being like on an insanely durable wall like Skarmory on a physically defensive end or Chansey on a special defensive end, why it's practically speaking one of the best defensive presences in the metagame. But the fact of the matter is that despite all of that, despite it being a clear staple on the most common types of teams, Ferrothorn and Latios are still better. And honestly, it has been a debate between us which is better. I think recently, the uptick in versatility among the set mix of Latios has helped it become the best Pokemon in the metagame. And also, I think that highlights why Black and White is just such an amazing metagame. 10 years into a metagame that has been filled with some of the best players of all time. You can go down the list of the top 10 players of all time, and all of them have had significant stints in Black-White OU. They've all put their hands and they've all put their minds to how to make the tier the best possible. And Latios, the face of the tier, is still evolving in its set mix, and that is absolutely outstanding. That is amazing. Latios typically ran the Choice Specs and Choice Scarf set. After the Sleep Ban, it got to run Trick over the previously common Sleep Talk, which was cool, but that made it even better. But then people started really covering Latios as hard as they could, running a lot of special defense Tyranitar, plus the secondary Steel, plus the Revenge Killer, those type of videos. But then all of a sudden, it began running Culver Berry to potentially avoid the pursuit and either, get an extra attack off of Tyranitar, which is huge, potentially winning the game in the long haul if you've got another Psychic type like Alakazam or Nicholas in the back. Alternatively, running Roar to rack up the spikes damage, that's just insane. Or even running things like Hidden Power Fire to hit Ferrothorn on the switch in, making Latios borderline uncounterable. Especially when you factor in the fact that you can run things like Calm Mind plus Dragon Gem as well. And again, the Choice Spec set is still an historically amazing nuke. So Latios is already huge, but coupled that with the fact that it's one of the few things that can check Keldeo, one of the few things that can soft check Thunderous T, one of the very few things that is able to revenge kill every single ground type in this metagame filled with horrifically strong offensive ground types like Landorus T, Swords Dance Gliscor, Sandforce, Excadrill, Garchomp. You go down the list. It isn't able to revenge kill Mamoswine too well, and if Excadrill's at full, maybe not the case, but still, it is Nuke City in that regard. Also helps resist things like Rotom Wash's attacks. Just sits there against Skarmory if it's able to hit it with Specs attacks or Hidden Power Fire. I mean, you go down the list, it's really just a phenomenal Pokemon, and it's hard to minimize Latios. We've seen things like Jirachi and Scizor seen a bit of an uptick, a bit of a renaissance in terms of Jirachi and Scizor's viability, which is cool, but even that has not necessarily been enough. So yeah, Ferrothorn, however, might take the cake in the eyes of some, and personally, before the Colbert set, I had Ferrothorn as my number one, despite using Latios on every single team, because Ferrothorn, you might as well use it on every single team as well. Spikes are so good in the metagame, and unless you're going to go out of your way to use something that's seldom used and played with inconsistencies and matchups where you wish it were just about anything else like Xatu, it's always going to carry its weight. Rapid spinners cannot reliably spin against Ferrothorn ever, unless you're pairing something like Magna Zone with Excadrill or Rotom Wash and forcing a burn, which a lot of players have learned not to let their Ferrothorn take a burn in that matchup. Then you're going to be hard-pressed. Starmie, unless it's Reflect type, which is very rarely used due to the move slot picking up a ton and, you know, not really paying off a ton either because you could just switch around and still force things as Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn's going to beat that as well. With a lot of players going accustomed to defog, minimizing hazards, and hazards being more of a temporary thing in the game that can help gain progress but still not necessarily dictate the game flow, Ferrothorn in Black-White is the exact opposite. It is a punisher. A layer of spikes on turn 1 could basically be as good as getting a kill. It could potentially also set up rocks, knock off for opposing Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn wars are just so huge. The fact of the matter is that on rain teams, you virtually have to use Ferrothorn if you're not using Jirachi plus extra support, because Jirachi is super susceptible to opposing spikes. Ferrothorn's just that good. It provides a psychic resist, it provides an amazing utility spinner, it's able to dissuade opposing rain a little bit as well. You name it. Ferrothorn's defensive presence is also amazing due to the fact that it's grass plus steel typing, and it's able to resist a ton of things, but also neutral attacks like Earthquake from Mamoswine, it can tank 2 of, for example, and kill back, which is huge. You know, the ability to 1v1 things is amazing. For example, if it's not Hidden Power Fire Latios, Ferrothorn is pretty much able to 1v1 to 2 other Pokemon in S rank for sure. It does pretty decently against the water types and Alakazam in A+ rank as well. You can go down the list. The fact of the matter is that Ferrothorn is not only just a spiker that just sits there, much like Skarmory could be seen as. Well, Skarmory obviously has plus matchups like ground types, but Ferrothorn is a beastly presence. It's something that you actually really can't be passive around, something that forces proactivity. It's a wall that ramps up so much pressure on teams. It's arguably one of the best offensive presences indirectly just because of the presence Spikes has in the long term. You have to pressure it. You have to minimize it. You have to force trades. If it's going to get 3 layers of Spikes up, you better make sure it's killed and you can't get anything out of it. Even it can't like be a fodder later on. You need to say that if they're putting you in a timer with Spikes, you have to put them on their own timer in terms of defensive presences they have allowed. Otherwise, you're going to lose in the long term. Someone who's going to let a Ferrothorn waltz all over them early game is far more often than not going to lose the game. And there's never been a Pokemon like this in OU ever. The closest I could think of is ADV Skarmory. And ADV Skarmory plays totally differently. Totally different matchup dynamic. So even then, there are spinners that can beat it. There are ways to mitigate it. There are ways to maximize it. ADV Skarmory is probably, by the way, in a totally different league of viability in its own. I can make a video on it, but BKC would be better to make that video. But the fact of the matter is, the pressures of Black and White Ferrothorn are simply amazing. Absolutely unmatched. Ridiculously good. So, I was close to putting it above Latios, but ultimately I just couldn't justify that. I'm probably going to have to split this into 2 videos, because it's 6:59 right now where I live. And I was supposed to go until 7 only, but I was like, okay, I started a bit late, so maybe 7:30. But we're 18 minutes in, and I'm only in S rank. So this is crazy. Alright, we'll split it in half. I'll do this. I'll go through it all the A ranks in this video. Sure. I'm going to pause for 1 second first and foremost, guys. Thank you. Ooh, boy. Okay. Got me some water. Anyway, let's talk about the A+ ranks, because these are still Pokemon that, you know, are all in the top 10. Be it Landorus T at 4 or Excadrill down at 10. And you could have seen those two flipped as recently as 6 months ago. So there's been a lot of movement. Gliscor has never been in this top 10 until really about now either. So that's pretty amazing. But let's get going. Landorus T's been a resurgent Pokemon in the last couple of years. The Leftover set in particular has been great. Previously, the Scarf set was a great anti-offense weapon, and it still is seen just as that. But in the modern age, being unable to revenge kill things like Corvidance Vulcarona is actually come to hurt it a little bit. Also, its inability to, say, take things like Mamoswine Ice Shard, not great. But, man, it's still great whatever you do. I personally find Swords Dance sets, particularly Fighting Gem, to be super duper underrated, virtually uncheckable in this metagame, which is pretty amazing. In addition to that, again, Scarf set, Leftover set, both great. As for staple status, you see it on basically every weatherless team, and I'd say that between it, Gliscor, and Excadrill, there's always going to be one of them on a sand team, and Landorus T is slightly more common than Excadrill than Gliscor right now, but both those two, between those two, it's really neck and neck. And I was actually considering putting Politoed and Tentacruel ahead of it, but what really skewed to me in his favor is the fact that Landorus T checks so many things with Stealth Rock, Earthquake, Hidden Power Ice, U-Turn, and it's not passive either due to U-Turn. I mean, it switches pretty reliably into any Gliscor set, once or twice at least. It switches into Excadrill once comfortably, and that's really all you need in a lot of games. Any Breloom set, if you're 241 speed, you can check once early in the game, that's all I can ask for. Garchomp, unless it's specially oriented, you're going to be okay against. Same with Dragonite. Terrakion, it gets a little dicey, but you can do the trick. Scizor, you're all over. When you go down the list, you look at all the physical attackers, it's just a super duper practical option. It's always going to get into the game multiple times, it's always going to hold its own weight. Against Skarmory teams, you need to pair it with something like Magna Zone, Rotom Wash, go down the list something like Xatu or Spin Support, but you can easily minimize Skarmory, and besides that, nothing loves switching into Gliscor. Earthquake, Hidden Power Ice, U-Turn alone makes it a beastly offensive presence, coupled with the fact that Intimidate and Leftovers makes it a really good defensive presence. The Leftovers sets are phenomenal, and if you want to ramp up the offense, then the Fighting Gem sets make it so not even Skarmory can check you. Suddenly, you're getting a kill every single game you play it right. If you want to look at the Scarf sets, it's an amazing game tempo Pokemon. It is vulnerable to Stealth Rock, taking it every time without any recovery, and it's a U-turner, so that's tough, especially with the bonus of Rocky Helmet, Iron Barbs that you can counter in a tier. But generally speaking, if you pair Scarf Landorus T with either a very offensive backbone, Magna Zone, and or Rapid Spin support, you're probably going to be semi-okay. So, admittedly, I'm not as high as Scarf Landorus T as others are, but I think the other sets, and particularly Leftover set, really push it over the top to the point where I would definitely rank it above Gliscor. And again, I'm kind of neck and neck between it and the Rain Pokemon, but we'll get there in a moment. I guess that moment's now, as next up we're going to be discussing Politoed and Tentacruel, and I purposely put those Pokemon next to each other as I am a firm believer that Tentacruel is needed on between 90 and 95% of Rain teams. Every Rain team needs Rapid Spin. Between the fact that Ferrothorn naturally is going to just let entry for Ferrothorn too much. You're always going to need Rapid Spin, or Xatu, I guess, but Xatu sucks so much against Tyranitar that it is kind of a hard sell for me, unless you want to run a really particular set in Xatu. But yeah, Tentacle and Rain's nasty. It's got 5 lives, and I'm not kidding when I say that. It's able to check things that Rain doesn't like dealing with, either spikes from Skarmory, sits on Keldeo, able to beat Vulcarona, which actually is low-key really good against Rain teams that like Scarf Keldeo. Revenge killing things like Mamoswine, which Rain teams never ever switch into more than once. We can go down the list. Scizor is a really annoying pursuiter for the Psychic types you find on Rain. If it's Scarf, but you can just sit on it with Tentacruel always. It's got a nice speed tier to where it's actually got great utility. Able to revenge kill things like Excadrill and Landorus T that's not Scarf, and even Gliscor in the Rain, which is pretty comfortably, pretty good for me, in my opinion. It really minimizes the effectiveness of Magma Storm Heatran with Sunny Day. Actually can be a pain in the ass. If you get a Rain Scald on it, then even if it tries to set up on you, it's never going to be able to. Neutral Scald, same deal. You could worst force a trade, and then your Politoed is going to be able to keep Rain up, which is huge. Status. Toxic Spikes can totally dictate games if you're not facing the right support for that, or teams are super vulnerable to it. Toxic is great for things like Rotom Wash, Latios, things that commonly switch into it. Hitting something like a Jellicent to switch means you could spin in the long haul, which is pretty dope. Gastrodon's a big pain to those teams, but if you get those up, then if you get Toxic up, then that's great. Yeah, no, I'm really, really big on Tentacruel. I think you were kind of foolish to use it without on Rain. Starmie is a bad spinner. It has no longevity against Ferrothorn. It's pursuit bait, more so than Tentacruel even is. And on top of that, I think the best way to use Starmie on Rain is actually to spec set when paired with Tentacruel. You use Politoed plus Tentacruel plus Starmie, but even then, Starmie on Rain is actually really inconsistent, really risky right now, and it puts you at a huge disadvantage against standard Sands, in my opinion. Exasperates weaknesses to Rotom Wash much more than Tentacruel would, for example. Gives you one less bulky-ish Pokemon, leaves you vulnerable to Vulcarona unless you run Keldeo, and then you're running 3 water types, so you can't even 3 water types without Tentacruel, so you can't even really check opposing Keldeo too much either. It's just a huge problem. I mean, just synergistically speaking, if you have Politoed plus Starmie, then you can never cover a lot of the things you can cover with Politoed plus Tentacruel, unless you're okay using Starmie in Rain as your Keldeo check, or you're okay losing to Vulcarona and just foregoing Scarf Keldeo of your own. And neither of those things are things I personally would find acceptable. Not to mention that Starmie's longevity is much, much less than Tentacruel, so you gotta get done quick. At that point, you basically have to run like Double Genie, Hyper Offensive Rain, which is more of a 2016, 2015 feel to it than it does in the modern day. So yeah, I mean, Tentacruel is always gonna be right behind Politoed for me because of that, and I think that a lot of players are catching up to that. I feel like I pasted this in the Black-White Discord, and people are like, why is Tentacruel so high, Finch? Why would that be? And I'm like, well, you can't really use Rain without it. And they're like, no, you could use Starmie and Rain. I'm like, really though? Can you? Can you show me an example of a good non-Tentacruel Rain built in the last 2 years? And no one really ever has a response to this. This has happened in like 4 or 5 different chats, by the way. So like, it's just like, think about it. So yeah, I mean, I honestly could see Tentacruel being a top 5 Pokemon in Black-White metagame. It's crazy because it's never been like an OU Titan in any other context ever before, and it will likely very much never be so again. But man, I tell you what, Tentacruel has to be tiered right next to or very close to Politoed, and this is how I see it. So yeah. Okay. Next up is the first of the many, many Psychic types you see ranked in Black-White. Alakazam. And Alakazam is phenomenal. Alakazam provides Magic Guard, and that alone sets the pace for so much in the metagame. Why is Magic Guard Alakazam so good? Immunity to spikes, coupled with the fact that it abuses spikes of its own, coupled with the fact that it abuses sand of its own. You suddenly notice that on paper, yeah, I can 1v1 it with Scarf Latios, I could 1v1 it with Ferrothorn if it doesn't hit 2 Focus Blasts but get high rolls. I could 1v1 it with Tar, usually Scarf Landorus, sure. Any Politoed pretty much 1v1s it. Yeah, no, I mean, shit, Nicholas 1v1s it, Rotom Wash 1v1s it, Scarf Chomp or Yachi Chomp can do so as well if that's right moves. Skarmory can do the trick. Dragonite, sure. Vulcarona, yeah. Go down the list, you're like, well, it kind of sucks in that we didn't even get to the fact that Jirachi and Scizor do super well against it. Mammospine's got the ability to Revenge Kill it. Jollicent lives 2 hits if it's not Grass Knot. You gotta run Signal Beam to even touch Celebi, and you're not gonna break Milotic either. I mean, you go down the list, Chansey, Mew, Crest, Hippout, like a lot of things that Alakazam's like, yo, I don't want to see them. So why is it so good? What makes it so that Alakazam is a top 7 Pokemon in Black-White? The answer to that question is the fact that Magic Guard is ridiculously abusable in a Pokemon with that much speed and coverage. Magic Guard makes would-be counters barely checks. It makes would-be checks Pokemon that Alakazam is just going to revenge kill later on in the game. A late-game Alakazam with Spikes and Sand is the most scary thing in the entire metagame, in my opinion. There's nothing that you want to see less unless you are very well prepared and you position yourself all game with its presence in mind. If you do not prepare for it, you simply put are going to lose to it. You can come to terms with that or not, I don't know, but let me tell you something. Alakazam is a menace. Let me give you just a hypothetical here. If I have a couple of spikes up on my side, they do on their side, I'm going to be wanting to use my Tyranitar to check that Latios, that Alakazam, right? But my Tyranitar might be needed to check a Latios to begin with, or might be needed to, get Weather up, or might be needed to set Stealth Rock up on their own team, or might be needed, to trade with something else. So maybe my Tyranitar is at, 50-60%. After spikes, it's going to be in range of Focus Blast and all like that, especially if rocks are up. It's like, okay, that's gone. But, okay, don't worry, I still have my Scarf Latios, right? Well, Scarf Latios can get a Draco and break Sash, sure, but you're probably going to take over half or eat a T-Wave or whatever, and if you're already low, then you're going to be dying. That's not great. And then all of a sudden, okay, don't worry, I still got my Landorus that dies HP Ice. I still got my Drill. Wait a minute, after Spike's Focus Blast kills that. Oh, I still got my Rotom Wash, but Rotom W is used in the early game at times. It's going to probably be burnt and knocked or low. And all of a sudden, you're looking at the late game, and you're like, everything's worn down. Besides Alakazam. And to my SS players out there, think of it like you would think of a Weavile, where it just slowly, methodically chips things down and outlasts them. It doesn't really take damage because heavy-duty boots. Magic Guard is heavy-duty boots, basically. But it's also immune to status, so it could just eat, Toxic from Tentacruel, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. And Alakazam is just such a scary in-practice threat. You need to try using a Sash Alakazam with Sand and Magic Guard Spikes, etc., and it's just impossible. The one downside of it, and why I haven't ranked it above, say Landorus T, for example, or the Rain Duo, which I didn't think I was ever going to do anyway, so I think it was really between putting Politoed and Tentacruel ahead of Landorus T or not. Landorus T is probably always going to be around them as well, so yeah, but neither here nor there. What was I saying? I lost my train of thought, sorry. But the main reason why there's a downside of Alakazam is that it is reliant on Focus Blast. You need Focus Blast to kill things like Ferrothorn, Tyranitar, Excadrill, you know. And if it connects, it's nothing scarier than it. And even that's just holding a Sash. Life Orb Zam is viable too. I don't really like it, but you know, you can use it. End of the day though, I mean, late game Alakazam is just a menace to society. I can show replays, I can go through SPL, you'd see it, but end of the day, there's just no getting around the fact that, you know, a lot of people have been using things like Scizor and Jirachi solely because of stuff like Alakazam and Latios. And Psychic types really do set the tone. They really do hit different in black-white, especially with spikes. They're really a product of the metagame around them, in all honesty. And Alakazam is a perfect example of that. One of the prime offensive weapons. So yeah. Next up, we got what might be a surprise to some, but not me personally, Gliscor. Gliscor coming in, I believe, number 8. Yeah, number 8. Man, Gliscor's risen up over the years. It's funny. Gliscor was down in the dumps for a couple years. It was still viable, don't get me wrong, but man, it wasn't great. And then, like 2017, 2018, I started seeing a career like renaissance. We saw that taunt set pop up in the World Cup. US Northeast won a ton. That set was really shutting down balanced teams. You know, Skarmory, Ferrothorn couldn't spike on it. A lot of teams, you know, you ended up playing games where spikes were on your side, but not on the Gliscor team side, and it was also immune to them, and it was just huge. It felt like it never died, especially defensive. It lives things like Alakazam's HP Ice, Scald's easy, Draco Meteor, sure, why not? And it was pretty damn hard to shake down. Gliscor, eventually, people started preparing for that, using things like more like Mamoswine, more Thunderous T, and then you started seeing, you know, leftovers Landorus T, but then people started using Swords Dance Gliscor, be it Swords Dance Ice Fang, which we saw in SPL, Swords Dance Facade a little bit, sure, why not? And with Pursuit support to trap things like Thunderous and Latios, that set was really menacing as well. And it didn't even necessarily need spikes as much either. It still worked well, but yeah, I mean, it was really hard to check in long haul. Cores with Swords and Gliscor were great, and I mean, now we've seen things like Stealth Rock U-Turn Gliscor as well. I use that quite a bit, actually, and I think it's really good. It's just a tempo, you know, it's a really good lead in the early game against right things. It could soak status, set the field, etc. And yeah, I mean, Gliscor's kind of redefined itself. There's definitely been a renaissance of Gliscor viability. And we've been fortunate enough to be, I just adjust my microphone, I hope I still sound okay, one of the better years or really stages in metagame to really see Gliscor thrive, and not even to an extent that's precedented either. This is the best we've seen it in metagame. You can do a lot of things. It's really good at soaks up status, and yeah, no, another status soaker at number 11, so stay tuned for that. But next up, we got Thunderous T and Excadrill, and my oh my, Thunderous T is a dynamic Pokemon, and let me tell you something. If I gotta put this on pause for a second. Sorry. Yo, is this thing on? Testing? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Alright, my man. I'm hydrated. Alright, let's get going. Thunderous T is a menace to society. And let me tell you, it was tempting to rank it alongside Tentacruel and Politoed, but nah, there are some, not many, rain variants that can justify not using it, but when it comes to rain Pokemon, you're going to be seeing Politoed on every team, obviously. Tentacruel, again, 9 out of 10 teams. Ferrothorn, probably like 8 out of 10 teams. Maybe 7. Thunderous T and Latios are the next two. They're quintessential rain Pokemon. You can really do a ton with Thunderous T right now. It is amazing. It is devastating. What? Look at this tier. Thunder, Focus Blast, Hidden Power Ice. What is checking it? Let me know. Gastrodon? After Ferrothorn spikes, Focus Blast 2 kills standard Gastrodon. You gotta hit 2 of them, that's true. But also, you sometimes see things like Nasty Plot. And Nasty Plot is switching immune to a KO and you don't kill it back. Or Grass Knot is getting more and more usage, which is even scarier. Thunderous T, not only is it devastating, nothing is checking it. Nothing is consistently checking it. Besides maybe, especially defensive Gastrodon. But then you don't even check Helios, so there's no point in it. And you can argue things like, you know, Chople, Mamoswine, or Carmine Latias, I guess. I mean, you could go down the list. There are like a few things. Like Chansey with Seismic Toxic doesn't even necessarily do Nasty folks. But like, the point is that Thunderous's set mix is so devastating. And oftentimes, it's just the most common sets that are as good as they are, too. Like, I like using Protector Substitute plus 3 attacks. Protect to out things like Latios, dropping Dracos on you. Like, okay, if it locks in the trick, you can just stay in Hidden Power Ice, then you're like, they're screwed. Alternatively speaking, though, like, how do I put this? Thunderous can like Focus Blast Ferrothorn, right? But it can also sub in his face and Nasty Plot. And it could, like, really 1v1 a lot of things on Dragmag, right? Because it lives a lot of single yellow hits and it kills back. But Agility could just outright sweep those teams. And it's not really vulnerable to priority either besides Mammoth Swine's Ice Shard. And on rain teams, for that type of generationally strong breaker to be that good and provide your electric immunity. So it could switch into things like Rotom Wash's Volt Switch. And it could pop in on Spikers and threaten both of them easily. And really support things like Tentacruel, keeping it alive longer because of that. Be immune to ground, which you don't see a lot of things. I mean, shit, you already got basically Politoed, Tentacruel, Ferrothorn on pretty much every team, right? None of them are taking ground types very well. That's a huge thing to bolster. Ease prediction, that type of ordeal. Landorus T is just a jack of all trades and a master of strength because of it. I mean, let me just go through the Landorus T sets I've used in the last month. Protect, Thunder, Hidden Power Ice, Focus Blast. A really great set. Protect, great momentum hog. It makes it so that leftovers are gaining a lot of health, be able to get off multiple offensive assaults. It's great. Substitute, Thunder, Hidden Power Ice, Focus Blast. Same deal, but you're running Substitute to set up, not as prediction reliant against like Psychic Spam, for example, so you can really threaten those teams. Focus Blast against Tyranitar, Ferrothorn. You're always getting kills against the Sand teams every time you come in. Not even just once in the game, but every time you come in. So if you come in 2 or 3 times, you're going to get if you hit. That simple. Agility, Thunder, Hidden Power Ice, and Focus Blast. It's going to carve up Hyper Offensive teams. Smurf is going to outright lose that for Stealth Rocks. I'm not kidding. Stealth Rocks is up against Smurf. And Garchomp takes any damage turn 1 because the Garchomp's almost always leading that matchup against Drain. Hidden Power Ice goes through Yachi and kills from 65%, 60%, whatever it may be. Breloom is going to die to Hidden Power Ice. Volcarona after Rocks, dead. Dragonite after Rocks, dead. Starmie after Rocks, dead. Scizor after Rocks is a roll at worst to kill. If not, Thunder just kills it and can't do much back. You see? It literally 6-0s with the Agility set. You need 1 free turn. And that's not impossible to get against things like Scizor. Against things that, like, just get forced out. Because if suddenly you're going to risk foddering off your Dragonite when you need Dragonite for Keldeo, for example, it's, you see? And things like this make the pressure for any teams. Even if you're not getting this, you force them to stay in and you get the kill, pick teams apart 1 by 1. And with Tentacruel, the best spinner in the metagame, to force hazards off, that's going to increase it. So you see how these Pokemon really support each other super well? There's some built-in synergy in these rain teams, and that's what makes offensive rain so hard hitting. There's nothing that can combine to check that assault without, you know, a ton of opportunity costs, without sacrificing other matchups. Rain's just that good. Rain's arguably broken, but you can't ban Rain because then the whole metagame spirals, and that's why Black-White is kind of in this really tight case of broken checks broken, and it's such an interesting study on metagaming and how the game has evolved with the passivity of Defog, Regenerator, Heavy Duty Boots, etc., Magic Guard being on Clefable as a Fairy type, you know, all those things, and that's just amazing. That's totally shapes the game. But Landorus T is unlike anything you've seen in Generation 7, 6, 8, and honestly, I don't think you've seen anything before. It is, in a sense, the offensive presence of Alakazam, but with better coverage and more outright strength, minus the speed tier and Magic Guard rain form. It's that, like, marquee real breaker that does need some support, does need some help, really does the trick consistently on sand as Alakazam kind of is on rain as Alakazam kind of is on sand. Not a perfect comparison at all, but you kind of get what I'm saying, right? On top of that, Focus Blast, Hidden Power Ice, Landorus T is actually one of the few things that check things like Pursuit from Tyranitar plus Sword Stance Gliscor. Being able to shut down that combination is huge. Being a semi-okay check to Leftovers Landorus T is amazing. Being able to 1v1 Excadrill is really great, considering the things like Politoed usually get 2 KO'd, Tentacruel's dying in 1 shot. You don't want to keep Ferrothorn on drill too much because you might risk losing spikes. So yeah, especially if you're not Whip. All in all, Landorus T has gone from being barely OU to being one of the better rain Pokemon to being a near staple in rain teams. It is so threatening. You always have to come prepared for it. You can't just run past this sand that gets mowed over by it. That's why we've seen more things like Celebi plus Spin. We've seen more Scarf Tard or Revenge Kill It. We've seen more, you know, double Psychic. You got a Sash Alakazam plus a Scarf Latios. Both of them to make sure it's going to be minimized. That's just huge. I mean, you can't just come in flimsy against Landorus T anymore. It's just not okay. You're going to lose. That's really all there is to it. But man, oh man. Landorus T, what a menace. What a fun Pokemon. Easily one of my top 3 Pokemon to use in the metagame. I'd say that Landorus T, Latios, and Landorus T are my favorite Pokemon to use right now. Obviously, Landorus T comes with some baggage in terms of Politoed and Tentacruel, but yeah. Finally, rounding out the top 10, we have Excadrill. A Pokemon that probably would have been top 5 had we done this, say, a year ago. or even at the start of this year, so 10 months ago, which is a huge difference, I guess. Okay, what a qualifier there. I'm really glad I'm dating myself. Oh, boy. Boomer. I'm a boomer at this point. It's tough. It's tough, guys. I'm 23 now. Playing this game for over 10 years. So you gotta bear with me. Anyway, man, Excadrill's still amazing, and it's very hard to check. I mean, if you knock off or burn something like Skarmory, even that's not gonna do the trick very well. Rapid Spin got so much PP in that, and it's funny. It's funny how those games go. But yeah, the thing with Drill is kind of lost a little bit of a niche due to competition. We see so much Gliscor, so much Landorus T. Previously, like, Gliscor was borderline S rank. It was definitely number 4 or 5 at worst. And Landorus T was clearly behind it. You could argue the metagame at one point was like Latios, Ferrothorn, Tyranitar, Drill, then Alakazam, then Rain, then Landorus T. And Gliscor was way down. But now with Gliscor taking more and more effect, we see teams that kind of focus on, hey, I don't need a spinner because I want Ferrothorn to be my primary steel type. I'm going to run 2 forms of speed control, and I'm going to end up stacking hazard immunities. I got Alakazam that's immune to hazards. I got Gliscor that heals off rocks with Poison Heal every time is immune to spikes. I got Latios immune to spikes. I got Landorus T immune to spikes, etc. You know, those type of teams. And those teams totally undermine the need for X-Drill. Those teams never ever run X-Drill. So not only is X-Drill spike vulnerable, but it is spinner. If you're going to use Drill, you're going to use a team that's focused on removing hazards in the long term. And that's a totally different strategy, and it works just as fine. But it also kind of mandates support like Magna Zone or Rotom Wash to burn or remove Ferrothorn, trick Latios to deter Ferrothorn, or allure Hidden Power Fire, Colbur Latios. You know, you need something for that to push the envelope. And even then, a whole different monster is Skarmory as well. Although some of the same tricks work, for example, Hidden Power Fire and Magna Zone do the trick there. So yeah, but man, oh man, Drill, besides Skarmory and healthy Rotom Wash, very few things like to take it. Gliscor and Landorus T match up favorably against it, which is playing in their favor as well in this metagame, but even then, you know, you switch into a Rogue Ironhead, it's going to be tough, especially if Sands up Sandforce. Shit is strong as can be. Moldbreaker Drill is some nice utility on Weatherless and Sun teams as well. Approaching staple status on Sun teams in my eyes. I mean, you've never seen Donphan anymore. You don't see Tentacle in those teams too often. Xatu isn't always enough. You know, Drill is very common on Sun teams. It's also great on Weatherless. Balanced Weatherless, bulky offensive teams. You never really see it on Rain and Sand. I mean, again, I think it's fallen behind other 2 ground types in the Sand Totem Pole, which is tough for it. And Garchomp's better on Weatherless Hyper Offense, so it's like, damn. Not to mention, Starmie's a good spinner on those teams too, like Smurf. Yeah, so Drill's niche has definitely went downhill, but I think it's just barely clinging onto the top 10. I was definitely having some debates between it and Keldeo and Breloom. I think you could definitely say Keldeo's A+, X-Drill's A, and I wouldn't have any quarrels with it. I think Breloom is a bit more awkward. Keldeo's ceiling is higher than I rank it. I'll be the first to admit that. I'm kind of low on Keldeo right now, but still. I think Breloom is right perfectly where it is, and that's the next Pokemon. We're going to use a segue to it. Post-Spore Breloom, you thought it'd be bad? No. It actually got better, which is so super duper crazy. As we hit number 11. I think this is like 11, 12. Yes, this is 11 through 19. And the next rank gets you like 20 through 27 or 28. Yeah, okay. So getting into Breloom here. Breloom's seen a bit of a renaissance of its own in terms of viability. Like, it had some tough times, but people noticed the Poison Heal sets were really freaking good for a while. Right after the ban of Spore, people started using them a ton. People stopped preparing for it. The lack of Sleep Talk Latios meant that, like, Facade Breloom was really good. That was a set I came up with, which I take full credit for. I love the Facade Breloom. I was like the first person. Like, people use it like way back when, but I was the first person to use it in like 2019, and against Pasho. And then people like started spamming the shit out of that. And it was like really cool to credit for Facade Breloom, because for a while the bulk up and Swords Dance sets were just popping. But yeah, nowadays Technician Breloom is seeing a humongous shift in usage. It's increasing a ton. And for good reason, too. With Fighting Gem or Life Orb or even Choice Band, what the hell switches into Breloom? Like, let me know. Skarmory is not taking low kicks very well. You got, like, Dragonite and Vulcarona resist the stabs, but after the rocks, forget about it. They ain't checking crap. Ryu Nicholas gets Tokyo'd. I mean, like, what? Like, it's just the fact that it's flimsy and it's reliant on priority and it doesn't have many Ochkos. It's more Tokyo reliant. But, like, with the right support, a Choice Band Breloom or a Fighting Gem Breloom is uncounterable. Besides Amoonguss, which has fallen off completely due to the Sleep Ban, which kind of funny. The Sleep Ban actually ended up favoring Breloom because of that. There's Celebi too, but yeah, you know, even then Celebi doesn't want to like take that, because if Celebi switches in and tries to Psychic to kill you and doesn't recover, all of a sudden, it's not going to be able to check the next thing it wants to. And that's tough, because Celebi is like oftentimes only used in teams that really need it for like Keldeo, Thundurus, Scarflatios, non-Single Zam type of stuff. So yeah, it can open the door like that as well, which is really cool. Balloon's not necessarily always a win condition. Sometimes it's an early game breaker, sometimes it's a role player, you know. And that's just technician sets. Like, the Poison Nail sets are oftentimes win conditions, but they're also breakers. They're hard to switch into. When you pair it with Pursuit, nothing can really do the trick against it consistently. And that is just so menacing. Pursuit plus Bloom has become menacing. Now, speaking of other Pokemon that benefit from Pursuit, Keldeo is one of them, but interestingly enough, it actually benefits a little more from Rain than it does Pursuit right now. It's kind of a battle between the two. And I'd say it's better on Rain than it is Sand at the moment. Scarf, Keldeo, and Rain is really devastating. We did see that period where Protect leftovers, or just leftovers in general. Keldeo was really good on Sand teams. The Pursuit support was great. Protecting Latios was amazing. And that opened up the game a ton, but less and less effective over time, I'd say. Especially with the abundance of non-choice Latios right now. So that's tough. But on Rain team, Scarf Keldeo is as good as ever. Spec Keldeo is menacing. Calm Mind Keldeo, underrated in my eyes. A lot of different things to do, even if Scarf is clearly the best set right now and the most common set. But yeah, no, I'm very fond of Keldeo at the moment. I think that it's probably one of the top, again, top 12, 13 Pokemon as it stands. And it's really, really good because of that. I find it hard to really find a flaw in Keldeo besides the fact that it's vulnerable to spikes. And, you know, it's going to get outrun by Keldeo, by Alakazam and Latios. So yeah, great revenge killer. Really potent in Rain. Unless you're running Jellicent or like Amoonguss, it's going to be hard to contain in the long haul. That's that. Next up, we got Reuniclus, the second Magic Guard Psychic type. And my, oh my. Whew, boy. Reuniclus is just so polarizing. It's been seen as broken in the past. It's been voted on a suspect back in like 2011, for example. On like one of those like group suspects. And since then, it's totally had its like focused metagame remodel. It was Trick Room heavy at one point, Calm Mind heavy at one point, then a different Calm Mind set. Now it's all over the place. You've seen Recover, 3 attack sets. I use that in SPL, and it's been pretty common since then. I really love Reuniclus. Yeah, it's got that Focus Blast reliance. It's got that Spike reliance, Sand reliance. But man, it's so strong. And I really like it with other Psychic types like Latios and Alakazam as well. I think it's super powerful. Admittedly, Reuniclus Sands tend to be pretty weak to Volcarona and Smurf teams, so you gotta be careful there. Calm Mind Reuniclus isn't great in general at the moment due to the faster pace of metagame, hyper offense, weatherless, seeing a ton of mentions in this video, unsurprisingly because it's more common in metagame. But Trick Room Reuniclus, pretty anti-meta right now. 3 attacks is at worst going to be trading in most games. You know, it's pretty strong, got great coverage, got nice niche defensively, status soaker, which is cool. So yeah, not much else to say besides the fact that it's cool that a Pokemon actually switches into encounters Tentacle. Because like everything else above this, risk burn, risk poison, doesn't like taking scald damage in Rain. Reuniclus is actually a Tentacle counter. It's crazy that you think about it like that, but nothing really wants to switch into it. Even Jellicent, obviously it does do it so all the time to take spin, to take scald, but if it needs Toxic or truly has Toxic Spikes, that's not great. Reuniclus doesn't care about anything that Tentacle can do. And it doesn't care about anything that Skarmory can do either, unless it's under 50%. Same with Ferrothorn. And that alone is just a huge niche of it. It finds tons of openings. And that's why it's part of why Pursuit is so good, because these openings are so easy for something like Reuniclus to find. You got to get Reuniclus off the field, otherwise your core, your strategy is going to be minimized entirely or negated entirely. So yeah, next up, I have a Pokemon that I ranked higher than most people, and I have a Pokemon that I ranked lower than most people, and I know this right off the bat. Rotom Wash and Garchomp, respectively. And I'm going to pause for a second to take a drink of water. Just give me a second. Yo, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. Alright, where were we? I think we were at Rotom Wash and Garchomp. Yeah. So, Rotom Wash is unique. It's unlike anything else. And it does have the same effect in other metagames, but I want to note that it's much, much less effective in those compared to this. Why? Well, for starters, Will-O-Wisp Burn is 12.5. And it does that in Generation 6 too, but we got more things like Natural Cure users that actually Soak Burns, Clefable with Magic Guard, and also just other status soakers. Just generation, things that switch in. So, Rotom Wash, Latios, Ferrothorn. Opposing Rotom Wash, Breloom, and it's got to get the Poison Heal up first, otherwise forget about it, and not to mention Technician Breloom's done. You'll see Tentacruel switching occasionally. Garchomp, those things don't want to take the burn. They don't. It's always going to stick. Coupled with the fact that Rotom Wash plus Pursuit is actually super threatening. You switch your Nicholas and try to soak that Wisp. You switch on Volt Switch. Forget about it. You're going to get Pursuit Trap. Same for Latios. Okay. But my Ferrothorn spikes up on it, right? But yeah, sure, trading a spike on turn 1 for a burn is not always good. If you're paired with Drill, if you're paired with Tentacle, forget about it. It's going to get that spikes and removed. You can't do damage with your Ferrothorn anymore. Rotom Wash is the ultimate game flow Pokemon. When it is able to get in and out unscathed, it is going to set the tempo for the game. It's going to set up its team. It's just going to be the ultimate team player. 6 medal a year type of beat. It's going to get all the assists in the world. It's not going to be the MVP. It might not even be your main win condition. It might even not be in like your late game path at all because it's an early game warrior. You're going to lead with it a lot. And the stats, everything, but it's so good. It's so good on sand teams. Fits on sand balance, fits on bulky offense. Scarf on rain, Scarf on weatherless, underrated. Overall, Rotom Wash, it's hard because there's not one stat. There's not one thing. It is the best stat, but when it comes to the intangibles, when it comes to the game flow, when it comes to integrating onto your teams and finding ways to make progress, finding openings to win games when it seems less likely than not, Rotom Wash is your guy. It generates those openings. It enables momentum to dictate the game flow and find the path for your strong Pokemon to win games, even if those strong Pokemon aren't Rotom Wash. You love using Rotom Wash with things like Ferrothorn. These spikes with it are great. And it also deters opposing Ferrothorn. If you get the burn, you'll win the Ferro War every time. You don't have to worry about knocking the first when you get that spike up. Forget about it. Get greedy. Overall, the one downside is it's simple status, sand, knock, etc. All those things. So you gotta be careful. But early game Rotom Wash is so good at setting the table. So good. Cannot understate that enough. Now, next up, I got a controversial take. Garchomp, shit has hit the fan. It was previously like SS minus, like 4 years ago. It was still A plus like a year or two ago. Now I got it in the middle of A. And honestly, I don't think it's gotten much worse. I think a lot of things have gotten better. Many games gotten a little more centralized around offensive teams, bulky offensive teams, and Garchomp's kind of out of the loop without his hyper offense. You see less and less sands with Garchomp because it's another spike vulnerable Pokemon with a lot of longevity. It doesn't fulfill the defensive niches of Landorus T or Gliscor while it doesn't spin like Drill. It's tough to fit. It doesn't really fit. You see a little more in Rain with the Yachi set. I think it's pretty dope there. Yeah, I like using one of it or Magna Zone on Mamoswine, sorry, on my Rain teams, but on Weatherless, it's still Premier, Stealth Rock Setter, potential cleaner with Scarf or Swords Dance plus Salic or Custap sets. Just really underrated Pokemon. A great set mix against Scarf, Swords Dance, Mix, Stealth Rock, you name it. It can do all these things and more. Garchomp's really great. I quite like it right now. I'm just kind of waiting to see where it takes the metagame because I think it's a great Pokemon standalone, but fitting in other teams, it doesn't do a ton defensively anymore. It's not really checking Bug Jump, Vulcarona. Good, cool, you're electric community, but every electric type can really threaten the hell out of you and beat you potentially, so it's tough. With the uptick in Skarmory, you want to use mix sets, but mix sets with Life Orb, they kind of die out eventually. It's just really tough. And I'm curious to see where the metagame goes as it stands. We'll have to be cognizant of that moving forward. Excuse me. Next up, we got Skarmory. Yeah. Oh, I'm fucking beat, guys. Okay, we'll go through A, and then we'll save A minus through S, through C for the next video. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll do another video on this later this week. That's fine. Skarmory is still Skarmory. It used to be a top 10 Pokemon. Ferrothorn's far and away the superior Pokemon of the two Spikers, but it's still great. Yeah, it's Tentacle Bait. Yeah, you kind of need to pair it with something like Jellicent because of that. Yeah, it's Magna Zone Bait. There's no real working around that, but Skarmory does great against ground types like Landorus T if it's not Fighting Gem, Gliscor if it's not Taunt, Extra in general, Swords Dance Chomp. It does well against Dragonite if it's not mixed as well. It's able to tank Dracos and Psychics from Alakazam, etc. Dracos from Latios and Psychics from Alakazam, that means. Spikes are great. It's got longevity with Roost. It's all good, but it's just not great anymore. I think that's the best way to put it. I mean, Skarmory's Sand is just very consistent right now, but there are argument matchups where it's more consistent because the team has good synergy and good, flow rather than Skarmory, because Skarmory is not always going to do the trick. Face Magna Zone, it faces Rain. It's not going to be as great. One sec, guys. Just gotta... Might be there, might be. I'm kind of fading at the moment. I haven't recorded for an hour long in a long time. I'm still kind of getting in that recording form. Because it's been 3-4 videos since I've been back, and I'm still not 100% with my voice. between being sick last week, as I told you guys in my last video, and just not having that many recent narrations under my belt, that I'm sorry. I feel like I came in with a head of steam, and once I got like past extra drills, it's like ooh. But I'll make it up. That's why I'm stopping after these next 3. But Skarmory is great. It's just not necessarily top tier anymore. Still top 20 Pokemon, but not much higher than that. Next up, we got Dragonite and Vulcarona. 2 Stealth Rock Pokemon with a ton of upside and some risk when it comes to sweepers. Dragonite probably a bit more consistent. That's why I rank it higher. It's got some nice resistances. Multi-scale with rapid spin support opens the door a ton in priority. Extreme speed is an amazing tool against side spam as well. So I really like that. Overall, unprepared for, Dragonite is going to sweep you. It's just that simple. But if you're prepared for it, you got things like Ice Shard, you got, a Scarflatius, you got Sashazam, whatever it may be. It's never going to sweep you, but it's still going to be really good. It's oftentimes going to be able to trade, force progress, be able to eventually with extreme speed. There's just a ton of utility behind Dragonite right now. I really like it on Smurf. I think it's underrated on rain teams as well, which is pretty cool. And on like screens and cheese like that. Yeah, Dragonite's a great pick. Yeah, you kind of mandate Starmie support or I guess Tentacle support in rain, but that aside, I'm still a pretty big fan of it. So yeah. So next up we got Volk. Yeah, Volk's the most polarized Pokemon in the metagame. You don't come prepared for it, you're pretty much gonna lose to Smurf. If you do come prepared for it, great. It's not gonna do a ton. I've been using a ton of Tracheon, Air Balloon, Heatran on sand teams lately. On rain teams, Tentacruel again, especially with Toxic, is great. Scarf Keldeo is good. Scarf Chomp, if you're not using one of those Pokemon, can also go such a long way for that. Even Scarf Latias, if you're able to get Chip on it, she'll be able to kill from like 60-ish, so that's going to come in handy. Or just force a Trick and minimize it, can make it so it'll only get to get 1 or 2 more kills, which, again, is still a lot, but it's at least not taking all 6 of them, Volcarona is a really scary Pokemon, though. It's one of the strongest in the metagame. You always got to be prepared for it. You always got to be cognizant of what it can do. And if you neglect it in team building, you're going to eventually get burnt for it, literally. Finally, rounding out A rank is Magna Zone. Maybe a bit more controversial, but I mean, in a metagame centralized around Ferrothorn and Skarmory, is it really that shocking? It also provides nice resist, and the Sunny Day set can really flip rain matchups. Also, with Magnet Rise plus Air Balloon, it can trap extra, which is pretty cool. All in all, Magna Zone, ton of utility. Great against the steel types, great against spikes. If you pair it with Drill, you can completely remove spikes in the equation, which is like the only true form that can do that besides like Xatu living in the long haul, which again, Xatu, you'd rather use Magna Zone at that point. So yeah. It also traps things like Choice Scizor. Subcharging with Solid sets are pretty cool, which they also do all against Jirachi, which is amazing. Yeah, I mean, there are different things you can do. I don't like Scarf Magna Zone too much besides Sun teams, but on like Sand teams, you can run Sub-Salic and Charge Beam up. You can run the Sunny Day set to dissuade rain, etc. There are a lot of things you can do, and I think that Magna Zone's carved a really nice niche in the metagame. I'm curious to see how it goes moving forward. But yeah, I think that's about an hour. I'm probably going to call it here. A little under an hour, yeah. Next time we're going to do A-, hopefully for C. Maybe we'll stop halfway through and make it a 3-parter. I don't know. Stay tuned for that. Probably later this week. Just probably go up Tuesday. It's Monday now and I'm recording this, yeah. But definitely want to shed some light on that with the Viability ranking update coming up soon. This is my personal rank, not the forums rank. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on all this and if you want me to elaborate on anything. All right, thanks guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out the Discord server. Be sure to follow me on Twitter if you guys like. The links will be down below in the description. And hope you have a great day. And if you're still watching at this point, let me know your favorite Pokemon or team in Black, White, OU ever. All right, thank you so much, guys. Have a great day. Respond to the comment question if you can, and bye. Later.